more than 300 people on this airplane. It could have been catastrophic. The pilot misjudged the altitude and clipped the back of the airplane back to shear the back portion of the airplane off. So there's pieces here and the fuselage is sliding down the runway. Horrible situation. This 777 Asiana airplane, everyone got off the airplane safely. Eventually this thing did catch on fire, and it's like this burnt out hulk of an airplane. Every person that sands a part or fastens this to that, this is why we do what we do, because people's lives are at stake.
Dave, 40 years in aerospace, 36 of them with Boeing, culminating with you as a vice president. You've led thousands across 8 different factories around the world. The Sheffield site in England, the Boeing Canada Winnipeg site, the Charleston, South Carolina site, the Portland site, and several in the Seattle area. Your teams have supported the 737, 747, 767, the 777, and the 787 aircraft programs. You've worked and traveled engaging suppliers in East Asia, South America, and Europe. You've endured through severe world stage crises. You've led, you've scaled, and you're still persisting in your endeavors to this day. I'd like to open really just understanding, how would you describe the person, who you really are?
You know, I think I'd best describe it, I think, as a person that people can trust, that is reliable, kind. It creates an environment where people can thrive every day in their work life, bring their best version of themselves every day. You know, I believe that the experience people have at work will travel home with them. Right. And it's important to me that they have a good, balanced life. And I feel like I have a role to play to ensure that happens.
I think it's a wonderful sentiment, especially after 40 years in aerospace, to have that mindset. So I am thrilled to have you here today. So
Sure.
Welcome.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here.
It's
so,
fantastic.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Yeah.
And we've obviously shared engagements, teaching on our previous courses,
Right.
but couldn't be more happier and excited to have you, especially for the inaugural episode for the Stronglink podcast.
Oh, great.
So
Yeah.
it's really
it's my honor.
pleasure.
Yeah.
So, you know, you and I have really shared some conversations around this topic, the concept of the strong link, those members that we consistently rely upon in our organizations. We look to these members to raise the bar when there's a problem. They're the first one we call, and we're looking to really understand that dynamic, the symbiotic relationship within the organization, and to try to identify, sustain, and scale the impacts of the strong links. And I thought a great place to start really would be, could you shape in our minds who is a strong link to you, and what do they bring to the table when you think of that?
Yeah, you know, I think a strong link is a person that has this internal drive to perform, and you know, they want to bring their best. I think they endure, depending, you know, regardless of what environment they might be placed in, they endure. You know, they have that internal drive that wants them to perform. They want to perform for their own, to meet their own expectations. You know, they'll be reliable, always there, helping, leaning in, finding ways to navigate through difficult situations. They'll be lifting up others.
Right.
That sort of thing, I think, in my mind, defines a strong link.
Right.
In any organization.
When you look back on your career, especially in the different sites, which is really interesting, do you think of any particular members or teams that really came to mind that embodied that kind of approach within your experience?
Well, yeah, I think you learn a lot in a difficult situation. You know, I've been through many, as you have led in, you know, difficult, like you mentioned, world stage crisis situations. I think, you know, aerospace is tough. It's a tough industry. It's hard to get an airplane developed and, you know, certified and delivered. And, you know, it really, I think, commands a lot of commitment. And I've been in many situations where people will rise to the occasion. You
Right.
know, it may feel like a daunting task. How are we going to get through this? You know, and I think just just that goal brings people together to achieve a really difficult project.
Yeah.
You know, starting the 787 program, for example, was, you know, a tough development program, an innovative, brand new
Right.
airplane. And so, you know, I think it's someone that really brings that kind of mentality, that they're going to rise to the occasion.
Right. And in our discussions, I know you've mentioned different instances. Can you think of any one in particular where you had to turn around an organization and
Yeah.
you relied on these members?
Yeah, you know, I've got a number of them, but I think the one I'd like to share is
Sure.
my experience in Winnipeg.
Okay.
I came to Winnipeg to help with the 787 development. Like many sites, Winnipeg was struggling.
Right.
It was a difficult program. I was asked to come to Winnipeg to help with kind of the project management, program management side of things.
Right.
And they were under immense pressure, you know, lots of close management from Seattle and
Sure.
so on. So, you know, as I was making my first trip to Winnipeg, I thought, you know, it's really important to me how I will be received. I want to be received as someone that's really with them, helping
Right.
them, and so on. And I think, you know, I thought about what would be the barriers to that. One being, here's this guy coming from Seattle, you know,
Right.
maybe one more voice to tell us what we're doing wrong. I'm not Canadian, and I think, you know, I consider that could be a barrier as well. So I think this experience really helped me develop skills around how to ingratiate yourself with a new team, you know. So I
Right.
came into that role. I sat with the team. I approached it in a humble way, just to listen and learn. I had previously thought about, you know, what might I encounter? Well, I suspect that no team's working harder than this team. When they're
Okay.
under this kind of pressure, they're working as hard as they can, you know.
Okay.
So you never, I don't think you ever want to, you know, right away judge any kind of commitment or effort. You just get there and appreciate the effort that's underway and begin to learn.
Was that the case once you hit the ground? Did
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what I found was the site leader at the time was not handling pressure well, and
Okay.
was channeling that onto this project team. So within about 2 or 3 days, I made an agreement with the site leader that she should stay in her office. I'll work with this team, and I will come report every day at 5 p.m. what's happening with this team. But I needed to create a buffer, you know,
Right.
between this leader who was really angry and, you know, putting fear into the team. I needed to build a buffer, so I did that, and I kind of absorbed that, you know, daily at 5 p.m. with this leader. But I was able to protect the team. They appreciated that. As I came along over the next few weeks, I began to understand more about what they were facing. I was able to ask better questions. I was able to see where I might be able to fit in and help,
Right.
and so forth.
I'm curious about that stage. So you're entering a new team. It's in the midst of a troubled stage within
Yes.
the organization, and you're looking around. You're assessing the situation. You're learning about the people and the culture within that organization. What stood out to you? Did you start to look at different enablers, different members that were granted a certain level of psychological safety, for example?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
You know, I believe that I believe that there are no surprises. You know, there's surprise people in any organization, but I believe there's no surprises as far as information that comes up through, you know, the organization and causes a leader to feel surprised. My theory is that there's suppression that occurs such that those facts can't surface. The facts are there, you know.
Right.
So, you know, what I really worked on was making it okay to share the truth, you know, what's really
Right.
going on here, you know. And I found that by doing that, I had to have patience. They had to try me out on this a few times. Like,
Right.
gee, Dave, this supplier's not going to deliver. What can we do? I don't know what we can do. They had to observe how I reacted to that. And I reacted in a way that was, okay, great. We understand this problem. So
Right.
now what might we do? How might we solve this? But I made it almost a celebration to get the facts on the table. We can't solve what we don't understand.
Right.
So I worked really hard in the first 2 months just to get clarity of the various problems we were facing. And that did a couple of things. It made it possible to start solving them. But also I noticed that it lifted some burden off the shoulders of people that were kind of carrying these problems, feeling that there was nowhere for them to go with
Right.
it, and that can be a very lonely place to be.
Right.
So as they were able to put the problem on the table, I could sense that the load was coming off. We were able to then collaboratively work on solving these problems.
Right.
The other thing I did was I made it okay not to know all of the answers today.
Okay.
We understood the ultimate goal. We knew where we were. And, it wasn't clear every step of the way how we were going to get there. But I said to
Right.
them, I think we know the first few steps, right? And yep, we can agree. And I said, I'm going to have faith in our team that as we take the first couple of steps, the next steps will clear up for us, and the fog will part in the next steps. And as we go, I have faith that we will make it to the goal, but it's okay not to know today,
Right.
And so we can take that stress away. Let's just do the first couple, and then the next steps we need to take will become apparent to us, and we'll take the next couple steps. And, if we go a wrong direction, we'll back up and go a different direction, So I made that process okay and safe. And that, really helped them not only bring the problem visible, but I think it encouraged their, ideas. Like, gee, we
Right.
could try this, or
Okay.
we could try that. And you started to really tap into the knowledge and experience of the group versus the leader saying, we're going that direction, follow me, I think it's important to set the process, set the direction, and then really include everyone
Right.
in
I'm
the
trying
journey,
to-
so.
I love the approach,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of sense. Just based on my experience when it came to aerospace, I'm envious, and I'm trying to understand how you were able to do that within the constraints and the organization itself. I find when I envision, for example, a senior director at a site trying to do the same, I feel they may come across a lot of tension, maybe from their peers or the higher ups, for example, to not let out tension within that room. This is
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
in contrast, even the military experience
Sure.
I had, there was more tension sometimes in these hangars than
Right.
I ever came across, for
Yeah.
example. So it's really interesting that you were
I
able
think
to.
it's, I think part of it is understanding how you're put together, some self-awareness.
Right.
I subscribe to the notion that the leader needs to stay calm under pressure, because if the leader cannot control their emotions
Right.
and starts to spin, that stress finds its way into the team.
Right.
And they also spin. And that's using energy that could be dedicated towards solving the problem we're
Right.
up against. So for me, it was more about understanding how I'm kind of wound, what are my triggers, and
Right.
how can I get ahead of that, I would do things like, I know that when the stress builds with me, I'm an engineer, I can get pretty analytical, So one area that I got to be careful in is asking for more data,
Okay.
We can make a decision, we need to know this, we need to do that. And if the stress builds with me, I'll start to really dive into,
Right.
wanting more data. And sometimes, that's important, but other times you've got to just, with the information you have, make a decision, So I, over time, became aware of that tendency so that I could, tamp it down ahead of time. I could, notice in my physical how I'm feeling. I'd go,
Right.
okay, I got to be careful here. I would share that story, though, with the team, which helped build trust because it's a bit of a vulnerability with them, I
Right.
think. It's like me saying to the team, hey, this is one of my faults here, that I can tend to get this way. And please, if you're feeling like, I'm drilling too hard, or I'm asking for more data than we need,
Right.
please give me some feedback, And the other thing I would do, a piece of advice I got was, when you're having this dialogue with your team, to, like, for a nanosecond, be this webcam observing the dynamic.
Right.
What's going on here? Are people just agreeing with everything I say? Are they disengaged, not saying anything?
Right.
Or is it a healthy debate, where they're like, no, that's the wrong thing to do. We should do this, not that,
Right.
And what we're after is a healthy debate. So I do that. And there'd be moments when I would do that, that kind of dynamic was not happening. So I'd say, okay, time out. We need to do a reset here. This is what I observed,
Right.
Let's back up and let's talk a little bit about maybe why are we not debating this more? And
Right.
I would invite some feedback. And then as we got more comfortable with me doing that, I asked each team member, kind of be on the lookout for this. You can be a webcam too, so please, you have full license to call a time out here.
Right.
If you feel like all we're doing is agreeing with each other, or you notice one member of the team, has withdrawn now from the
Right.
conversation. So, being aware of the dynamic, I think, is another.
So even on the dynamic piece, so you're there on the ground, you're looking to, I'm assuming scale, the intention was to scale the Boeing Canada Winnipeg site?
Yeah.
And you're meeting the members within the team. How large was the team, just out of curiosity?
Well, the employment at that site's right around 1,500, but at this
1,500,
time, when I was first there, I was working with about a 20-person program management team. Their responsibility was really the program plan that was driving the engineering, the supply chain,
Okay.
and operations. That's how I got involved initially.
Okay, so I'm really curious about engaging the team. You're meeting the members. You're seeing the different segments we've discussed. You're seeing those everyday contributors, the solid workers that we need, doing the daily operations. We've got some at-risk members, and you've got your critical enablers, and you're starting to learn the dynamics and see who these members are.
Right.
And when you look back, because I know you were able to achieve a substantial
Right.
scaling effect at that site, which was a huge win.
Right.
Pivoting a culture around being able to scale productivity, when you look back at the key members within your team, those strong links, the critical enablers, the leaders, was there a common trait or something that they were able to bind together with, or how did you mobilize the strong links to drive the change you were looking for?
Well, I think it's interesting, when you find yourself in a really tough spot, maybe it's like being in a lifeboat with people, it's like a bonding experience. Maybe military experience is similar. If you can go through a tough experience in a thoughtful, caring, kind way, I think it bonds people, And I think, with strong links, there are some people they come, I think, wired that way. I think for myself, I think I probably would have been considered a strong link, and why am I that way? I bring it back to how my parents taught me. My dad was a school teacher. He said, always do your best. Whatever job they give you, even if it's digging a post hole, do your best. And be kind with everyone, work well with everyone, and be willing and flexible to do whatever is needed. And that was kind of how I was raised, So I came to Boeing with that mindset. I thought this is, how you work in life. And so regardless of how I was treated, I had bosses that were nice and kind. I had bosses that treated me horribly.
Right.
But that sort of core drive that I got from my parents has always been there. And I think that's true with others too, So, but I think, it's possible, the strong links in an organization can be nurtured.
Right.
Those that are maybe in the everyday contributor can become strong links if you create the right environment. I think it reduces the number of at-risk members, So that's what I've always tried to do,
Okay.
And I think in the case of the Winnipeg experience, we had a lot of strong links, and we created a lot of new strong links.
Which is amazing. The scaling effect that can have on our organization is massive. And it kind of guides me into my next question. When that comes to when you've been in the position to be a critical enabler, when you know your actions are going to drive that next milestone, it's going to move the needle forward, it's going to raise the bar, for example, it matters to that person. It tends to resonate with their core values, their core beliefs, and this usually means you have to put yourself out there,
Yeah.
right? You even in the role as a leader, you may be more visible. You may be a visible target. You might be blamed. You might be sidelined. Sometimes you might even be neglected because you're sticking out for a particular reason. There's a certain inherent attribute of courage when it comes to being able to show up and say, I want to actually contribute in a way that makes a difference and that matters.
Right.
So when it comes to taking that initial step, especially in all the different environments you've worked in the different factories, even visiting the suppliers around the world, there's a lot of different factors, environments, the psychological safety that comes with that. And have you found what enabled either those members or even you to take that initial step to say, I want to be that critical enabler?
You know, I think it was what drove me down the leadership career path to begin with. You know, I was really enjoyed being an engineer, doing engineering work, you know, solving engineering problems. But what really gave me joy was helping others have a successful day.
Okay.
And I think, you know, that mentality that we've been talking about is one that it's really important to me. It's my core values. And I think if you start to get away from that, it creates this interference in your heart. You know, you can't, I don't think you can, in an authentic way, operate out of alignment with your core values. You know, so I made this decision that this is how I'm going to treat people. I believe it's the right way to treat people. Now, in my day, when I was just beginning to do this, it wasn't the common way to treat people. You know, it was. I had managers that would give me feedback like, you're too nice, you've got to be more in their face, you know, and that kind of thing. And I said, I just can't operate that way. I couldn't, you know, look myself in the mirror if I behaved that way. So I believe that the approach I'm taking will deliver results. So just give me a chance to demonstrate that, you know. So I just persevered, you know, that, you know, someone said to me once, you know, do what you can with what you have where you are. So I always had this mentality, like my little corner of the world, regardless of what's happening around me, I'm going to do everything I can to nurture and grow and protect this corner of the world, you know. And when I was first a supervisor of 15 people, that was my corner. As time went on, but, you know, at the end, I was a vice president, I had around 6,000 employees, you know, and that was, I had a bigger corner, you know, so, but the same thought, the same thinking stuck with me the whole way. You know? And then what I learned along the way were like, how do you actually do that? You know, there's like, I think we've talked in the past, there's one, you know, it's important to understand, you know, academically the need for trust and the need for nurturing and so on. But then there's the, you know, the everyday habits, the things you do. I learned a lot along the way about how do you bring it to life every day, you know.
What were some of the most common challenges you saw at most sites that needed that nurturing?
Yeah, it was people not being heard, you know. I think it's maybe the highest form of disrespect is to not hear people, you know. And if they feel they're not being heard, depending on the person, that they can really withdraw and disengage. And if that behavior sustains, they can become jaded, you know. And what a life!
That's
you know?
That suppression effect you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I mean, it's where they dread coming to work. You know, these guys don't know what they're doing. You know, can you imagine living your life that way, where you dreaded coming to work? I mean, I look forward to going to work every day for 36 years. There are some days, you know, we all have that, but I really wanted everyone to have that kind of work experience where you get up and you really, okay, I get to go to work today and we get to work with brilliant people and solve these problems. And so, you know, I think if you don't listen and you're not hearing people, it causes them to really feel disvalued,
Right.
that you don't feel that they matter. And when you're in a leadership role, I think it's an amplification of that,
Right.
So I did things that demonstrate, because I'm naturally curious, I want to listen. I think the things I learned to do are not complicated things. Like one of the things I did, and advice I give people today, is book the first 30 minutes of your calendar every morning to go around and greet every member of your team.
Right.
Say hello. Have a little chit chat with them. It's part of a social check-in and a work check-in. Like, do you have what you need today? But it's also getting to know them, and I think as humans, we need to get to know each other. That's
Right.
how rapport is built. That's how trust is built. You learn about people. You find out skills that you didn't know they had, and you learn about what their dreams are,
Right.
what they want to do, and that allows you to help them achieve that.
Right.
So,
And even in that role, so you're certainly positioning yourself as the leader,
Right.
a strong, like a critical enabler. But correct me if I'm wrong, that act itself, just hearing people talking to them, you're going to start getting inundated with all the problems, with all the frustration, all the blaming. Sometimes they just need to vent. People just need to
Exactly.
get it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's commendable, certainly as a leader, to be able to take that. That's also got to have an effect on you.
It does,
Yeah.
But what I did, initially I had my small team of 15.
Right.
And I did this like this every day routine I described. I did that with my direct reports every
Okay,
day. So
okay.
as my responsibility grew, I did this with my direct report staff was anywhere around 10 to 15 always. Even though the organization below me grew, we had, layers of management and so on.
Right.
But I did that with them, and I also expected them to do that with their team and so on. So it was like a behavior that I expected the larger leadership team to do every day
Right.
with their team. Now that said, I did a lot of walking around in and amongst all the several thousand people, and I ran into all kinds of things. There was one employee in one of the business units I led did all of our aircraft interior, and he was highly jaded. A smart guy, did good work, but really unhappy. So I knew ahead of time this guy Brian. They advised me, don't walk by Brian's workstation.
Okay.
So the first thing I do is I walk by Brian's workstation.
Of course.
And I guess I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Dave. I'm the new leader. And he yelled at me, basically.
Just yelled.
Just started ranting. It was
Right.
just this yelling rant,
Wow.
Kind of put me on my heels. And so I just listened, okay, he's, he got it, he kind of got past his rant. And I was able to decipher a couple little nuggets embedded within the rant, And so I said, okay, Brian, I think I heard you say this and this, that if we could fix this and fix this, it would reduce a little bit of burden. Yes, he said, he confirmed that. I said, okay, I'm going to work on that. And so I went and, I was able to lift that, stone off of his
Right.
off of his plate. And over the course of about a year, I would always walk by Brian's workstation. Every time he would yell at me again.
Wow.
I'd get another nugget,
Right.
but the yelling started to subside, And Brian was a member of the team. He was loud. Other people watched, So I figured if I can build a relationship here, I think it will have a broader effect. He was kind of, maybe you'd call him an informal leader
Okay.
in the organization. So over time, I got to a point with Brian where I would stop by. By then, I had learned that he coached his kids' soccer team. So the first thing we'd talk about, I'd say, hey, Brian, how'd the soccer game go last night? Oh, man, you won't believe it. They did an own goal. Oh, an own goal, But we would have some laughs, and we'd talk about soccer. And my daughter at the time was playing volleyball, so we'd go back and forth about this. He'd be curious, did they win? I said, no,
Right.
they lost, And then I'd ask him, how's it going here? He said, not bad, actually, I need this. If we could do this, it would help. But it was a calm,
Right.
collect, And anyway, I navigated through, months of the yelling to loud voices to, this could help to, hey, we're chatting about soccer now, and he's got an idea. And so his stress level went down, his productivity went up. many around him saw that
Right.
and said, gee, Brian's not as mad as he was. Maybe everything isn't quite as bad as we think, you know. To where when I was moved, you know, I spent 6 years in that organization. When I was moved to my next assignment, I went down and said, hey, Brian, they're moving me. I'm going to be doing this instead of that. And like the best compliment I could ever get, he shook my hand and he said, I've been here like 29 years and you're the first director that I actually have confidence in,
Wow.
you know, and cared enough to talk to me, you know.
Right.
So you could, you know, I could get all the thank yous from above, you
Right.
know, but nothing beats that. And kind of even back to my experience in Winnipeg, as we got through all of the stress and strain and we delivered on our promises, the team gave me, they just handmade this little honorary Canadian certificate.
Okay.
And they presented it to me one day and
Very
they said,
nice.
we're making you an honorary Canadian.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have this thing framed in my house. I'm
Right.
so proud.
An
that
honorary
I'm
Canadian
honorated, an honorary Canadian.
That's
you
really
know.
nice.
And I mean, I just dove in. I said, you know, I'm going to be here. I'm going to just completely dive in. My family, we just celebrated all the holidays. I
Right.
participated in everything. I want to be fully immersed. I want them to feel like I'm just one of them.
Right.
You know?
So it's an amazing story.
Yeah, yeah.
What was at the end state when you left Boeing Canada Winnipeg? How did that organization shape itself over
Yeah,
the
you know,
5 to 6 years?
when I first got there, you know, the company was really wondering, geez, you know, are we going to continue to invest in this site? Do we need to shut
Okay.
it down? Do we need to sell it?
Right.
That was the conversation, you know.
Right.
And of course, as I began to understand just the sheer talent that's there, I thought, no, this site they can really perform. So we demonstrated that, you know, and by the end, I spent 5 years. I had gone from being this program management person to the head of operations to the site leader, you know.
Right.
And at the end of that, the company was so happy with the performance of the Winnipeg site that they decided we're investing $100 million into
Wow.
this site. They added on a significant expansion to the factory.
Right.
The 737 MAX work was brought in, and
Right.
the employment grew. And so we went from being, you know, should we, you know, exit this from the portfolio to let's pump resources into this. It's like a gem of the company.
Which is an amazing turnaround.
Yeah, yeah.
Unbelievable to
Yeah.
hear that level of investment.
Right.
What would let's call it the top 3 levers be that you, as a leader, driving that change? What were the main keys to your success in turning that around?
You know, I think kind of like what we've been talking, it's actually delivering the results. You know,
Right.
you know, it's important that we deliver the results. And I submit that you can deliver the results at the same time that you're strengthening and uplifting the team, and the two go hand in hand, you know. You can
Yeah.
force results, you can believe that you're going to command a result, and you may feel for a while that that's going to deliver, but it's not a sustainable process, and I think it limits what the team can creatively do, you know. When you can sort of unlock that involvement, the team will think of things that you could have never imagined.
Right.
You know, they'll overcome challenges you could never, in your own mind, think was possible.
So that first strategy, being able to strengthen the team while scaling, driving results.
Yeah.
I love the idea and the concept. It's fantastic. To me, it reminds me of the quality, time, cost triangle.
Yeah.
And there's a mindset and mentality that you can get two, but you've got to sacrifice one, for example.
Yeah.
But you're speaking about a holistic approach to
Yeah, I think you
achieve.
need them all, don't you? You need quality, you need schedule, you need everything.
Right.
And I think that we should strive to deliver everything. And I found that, you know, engaging the team like we've discussed is the recipe for that, you know.
So I would love to pull on that. So your
Okay.
recipe, let's say we've got another director, senior site leader moving into an organization, and they need to look at some similar scaling initiatives. And if you had to look at a guide or coaching or mentoring that member, what would that recipe look like that they can?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think the hardest part, I think, when you're going into a new role is, I think everyone probably feels some, like, fear, like I've got to learn this, I've got to quickly, come up to speed, I've got to quickly perform. So you have this feeling of vulnerability, like, what do I do? How do I do it? I think you have to have patience to take the time to understand and demonstrate to the team that you really want to learn. Not every job I had, I came in as a domain expert. Most of the time I didn't. I had general experience, but I learn as I go, and I have to respect. I felt I wanted to respect the effort that they were putting in.
Right.
Even if we weren't meeting expectations, I knew that they were working as hard as they could. So I think a lot of leaders get off track by coming in on day one and directing. Stop that, start this. You're not trying hard enough. I think they lose trust immediately. And it's tough to bring it back, So I think it's to be humble, listen, learn, spend what might feel like an uncomfortable amount of time learning,
Right.
So it takes a couple of months, I think,
Okay.
Usually for me, I'd go into a job and I would spend the first 4 months feeling pretty uncomfortable. Like, geez, I don't think I understand the lingo fully. But every day I'd get a little bit smarter.
Right.
I was very open with the team. What I found is when you show genuine curiosity, people are proud of what they do. They lean forward. I think it's maybe part of our human nature to want to help another person. If they're like genuinely like, gee, I don't understand it. Can you help me understand? They will lean forward and say, well, let me show you how this works, and I'll help you with this. And it gives them a feeling of helping, me. I was learning. I tried to be, a person that wasn't asking questions that I knew the answer to already. Right. It was genuinely, I don't understand, can you go through this with me one more time? So.
And how did you manage the stressors from higher that are probably wanting you to?
Yeah. And it varied. I've had managers, when I would be in these situations, I've had bosses that were very impatient. Like they want to know day 2, okay, what's the plan?
Of course.
And I had to resist that. And it was really hard for me. I took a lot of pressure that I would not translate to the team, so I would absorb that. And I had to just really try to convince them that just give me some time. The problem didn't come about in a day.
Right.
We're not going to unravel it in a day, but I can assure you that we will get through this.
Right.
I wasn't sure every step of the way, kind of like having faith that we'll find a way.
Right.
But I've been through enough of these, that even if we're not sure how to solve it, I'm confident we will.
Right.
We'll just find our way through it. And
okay.
so I would, sort of manage up that way.
Right.
As the performance came, kind of back to Winnipeg, part of my job really then became, the site was performing, we were, meeting quality, delivery, safety, all of the metrics were being met. And so part of it for me became, let's carry on, but I wanted to give the message up and out,
Would you say you're obviously managing the higher expectations, you're creating a buffer, you're taking the time, which is a hard thing to do, especially when you're there for a reason to drive a change, but you're releasing tension out of that organization, that room in essence. Yeah. Did you find that certainly being able to allow members to talk and now start to share, did you find that the dynamic shifted from you needing to pull to them being a push to you?
Yeah. It wasn't me having to, play a game of 20 questions to try to get all the facts out.
Right.
They were much more comfortable sharing. And
what drove that comfort? Were they? What I'm curious about here is, were they starting to invest in you?
I think so. They trusted me. They had come across a situation that needed to be dealt with.
Right.
And they felt comfortable putting it on the table and not, fearing any kind of backlash to that. Because I just would say to people over and over again, problems do not get better with age. They're easier to solve when we first discover them than if we feel like we can't shine a light on that problem. It will just get more complex, So just through a lot of doing it,
Right.
people became more comfortable. Some come quicker, some it takes a little longer. But for me, it was like it was a behavior that I adopted that I just could never compromise.
Right.
You know, I had to consistently every day encourage, okay, what else is there out there that we haven't seen?
Right.
Can you think of anything else that could go wrong? And sometimes, you know, we would try to imagine what could come up that maybe hasn't, you know. So we would try to imagine ahead, like, okay, what might nail us in the next step or the step after? And, you know, sometimes people are like, gee, I don't know, maybe this could happen, maybe that could happen. So I figured out, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'd create a little scenario. Let's pretend, you know, we're 6 months out and we missed this delivery, and it's like, oh no, you know, what happened? So we create a little scenario to dissect, you know. So if this would have happened, if this happens, and we start to back up, what could be some causes that we can now be on the lookout for? Because, you know, this could happen. It's happened to us before. It could happen again. Let's be on the lookout now for problems that may pop up that we haven't seen yet. You know, so we start to kind of get ahead of it a little bit. It's like identifying risks
Okay. So
ahead of time, you know.
Right. So
Some risk management types of
Right.
things. I think as you get further into this, it's not so much just solving the problem that's fallen in your lap. It's doing that, but it's also now, can we look ahead and get that window further and further ahead and so
Okay.
on. Yeah.
So I really like, in my mind, there's the first two steps of this recipe, in essence, is first setting the conditions for increased safety within the members, so to feel more comfortable being able to share. They're starting to see the human side of you, and they're trying to not just invest in the success of the business, they're investing in you, because you're building relationships with them, and now they want to see you succeed, makes them want to succeed as well.
Right, yeah.
So there's an investment there. And what I really liked is the shaping of more that, maybe it's a 2-year horizon or a 6-month horizon, and breaking out of the day-to-day narrow focus and using that as a tool to, again, shift the dynamic from that pull to a push, because now they're starting to look further ahead.
You know, and I think sometimes, you know, you can get kind of caught on this treadmill where all you're doing is solving the problem in the moment. you know. And if you don't step off of that treadmill long enough to examine sort of the bigger environment, that's all you'll ever do. So, you know, I would always, in these situations, find a way to create a little bit of capacity while we were solving, you know, all these things. Create a little bit of capacity for us to start to look even 1 week ahead. And then 2 weeks ahead. Because that starts to get at some of the root cause, you know. And eventually, as you get further and further ahead, the treadmill activity slows down. And you start to feel more in control, you know. So, you know, I saw a lot of teams struggle because they just got, you know, so focused on, I got to solve today's problem. Well, there's always a today's problem.
I've lived that.
You know. So you got to do it, but you can't do it at the expense of starting to get out in front a little bit. Even if all you do is get a day or a week, you know, sometimes it's that much. You just get that, you know, which is helpful, you know. So,
I remember we were living, sometimes the next shift was too far ahead.
It can be like that. It can be, okay, by 3 o'clock today, you know, or so maybe it's only 24 hours to start with. But I think it's important that you know, with some structure, do that.
Start looking ahead, just to break the norm. No, I can definitely see that. And when it came to driving that change, so I really like you're shifting the focus more to the longer term. How did you, you know, instinctively, on my mind, when it comes to sustaining that change and moving forward, there must have been wins along the way, certainly.
For sure.
Like you mentioned, you want to celebrate, even just sharing information, which is great. What about sustaining a why, a reason for why we're facing these challenges? Even sometimes looking a week ahead might be a daunting task. You know, there's got to be some reason, some motivating factor that keeps the dynamic for them to still be a push rather than them retreating and you know, pulling. So how did you sustain that why?
You know, you know, we made it easy. I think it's important for leaders to be really clear on expectations, really clear on the ultimate goal, that's not ambiguous. I think a lot of times teams will, if there's ambiguity and like, what are we doing? You know, I don't understand the direction. What's the goal? I'm not sure. You know, I'm just here. I feel like a hamster on a hamster wheel. That's dangerous, you know, for any team as far as building a commitment and a motivation. So that, you know, I really learned in a very unambiguous way how to like paint the picture. This is what we're after, you know.
Okay.
And we would visit that regularly. Like, okay, here's our North Star. You know, almost daily. We would start every morning.
Is this like a look ahead for a few weeks, a few months?
It can be like in my Winnipeg example. It was like in 8 months' time.
Okay.
We have got to deliver a fully assembled, complete wing-to-body fairing for the first 787 airplane delivery.
Huge
milestone. The rollout of the factory, the very airplane number one.
Right.
We designed it, we built it, we sourced the supply chain. This was our initial goal that we set for ourselves.
And how did you revisit and was there a product, or was it just a point to restate that that's the goal?
Yeah, I think it was just, actually we just put it on the wall of our meeting room that we spent our days in. We had like a picture of an airplane, we had our product, we had a date, we got to deliver this product by this date, and you deconstructed it into all its components, and you could build a proper project plan and so on. But that ultimate goal was on our wall.
There was still a visual of
the
end
it's
state.
like, okay, this is what we got to do. It was really clear,
Right.
And then, a lot of what we've been discussing, we may not know every step of the way, but we will find a way.
I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
Especially the visual component of it.
And people, I don't know, I've always thought it kind of may in some ways become a bit of a game, like we want to win the game. It was like a team competition, like we can do this, and people would like rush into the room with excitement. Oh, you won't believe it. I just, I got this supplier on the phone just now, and they're going to be able to like shave 2 weeks off this component. It's like, woohoo, we'd celebrate that as if it was like scoring a goal, in a soccer match or something. So in some ways, I think there can be that element of fun you can have doing this. So
what about setbacks?
Yeah, they do happen, and just like the example just now, like we shaved 2 weeks off. Oh no, this supplier just scrapped all the material we had. We've got to like get some additional material. Like okay, it's where we are. It's what we're up against now. So let's start to look at options here. It was back to me staying calm, celebrating the fact that the problem is now visible, and what are the 10 different ways we can attack this. And it was that kind of a discussion, like back to like observing the team dynamic. You can get tunnel vision, like, oh, we're doomed. There's only one supplier for the material. They're out. Well, okay, I'd get up at the whiteboard. Okay, we're going to brainstorm 10 ways to solve this problem. Now, what are 10 different possible countermeasures to this?
Right.
And so we kind of, force ourselves to think a little bit more creative. Well, gee, maybe if we get a little bigger cross-section of material, we can bandsaw it in half and mill it down. Yeah, I think we could do that. Anyway, we find ways that way, But, it has to be an environment where people will shout out their ideas, even if they're maybe not viable, but they have to be comfortable going, hey, we could do this, and then we think it through. Well, okay, that won't work. You don't want them to hold back, so it was important that they felt safe in just shouting out their ideas, like how we want to deal with this,
And it reminds me, in our discussions, we're talking about turning this side around and being able to scale it to a point where a huge level of investment went into it, which is amazing. You've also had to lead teams through those severe crises around the world. And at each point, like the ones we've talked about, of course, like September 11th or the pandemic, for example, things can come screeching to a halt.
They can.
And sometimes that stress can cause members to revert or disengage.
Right.
Those critical enablers are fed up with it, or they reach a point that they may leave the organization, or they just retreat back.
Right.
And you've had to turn that around. You've had to bring these organizations back.
There's a lot. I think there's a lot of dimensions to consider.
Right.
we've talked a lot about how to bring people along and help them feel engaged and help them feel good about what they're doing. At the same time, recognizing the stress that everyone's under is important, you know. And I think this is probably true in many industries. Certainly in Boeing, there was like this badge of honor if you worked crazy hours, and you know, people would brag about, I worked, you know, the last 75 days straight, you know. And I had bosses that would check the parking lot when they left to see whose vehicles were still there, and they would judge the commitment of employees based on that, you know. So I would, along with all the, you know, discussions about how do we work together, how do we solve problems, I also would work on how do you take care of your personal health, you know. And for me, I think I hit like a fork in the road in my early 30s, which I got trapped into this, you've got to work day and night if you're going to get ahead cycle, and it was affecting my health. And I realized, I said, gee, this is not sustainable, you know. So
what was that situation like? What was your day-to-day life when you hit that?
Well, it was just, I was working, you know, 12, 14 hours a day,
Weekends.
Every weekend, you know. It was just constant. I wasn't getting the kind of, you know, time to take care of my own health. I was feeling a lot of stress and anxiety, and I just did not feel good, you know, physically did not feel good.
And how did that affect your interactions, your productivity?
You know, I just had less energy. I wasn't able to, you know, engage with the team as well. I wasn't, you know, I just didn't have the ability to perform at my peak, you know. I think what happened was that, you know, stretch of working that long, I think it lowers your ability to perform, and even though you might spend 14 hours at work, what you accomplish is not 14 hours of productivity, and I'd say it's not even 8 hours, you know. So that became apparent to me. I can't carry on like this, you know. So I, in my early 30s, decided, you know, I'm going to take care of my health better, and I started an exercise program. I set a goal for myself. I said, I think I'd like to run a marathon.
Okay.
And I hadn't run at all, and so I wanted to do that for the main reason I felt like it'd be a worthy goal. You know, it's not an easy distance. You know, it's something to really strive for. And I found out that by doing that, you know, doing a little bit of exercise, the first time I ran 1 mile, I had to like lay down, you know, it like took that much out of me. But I noticed that for at least that, you know, period of time, it like cleared my mind, you know, and I had that response, and I thought, gee, I like this, you know. So I really got on to that, and I just kept going and going and going, and I did run a marathon, and then subsequently all kinds of events.
Right.
Not so much that I thought I was a great marathon runner. I just was really found that it cleared my mind, the stress dropped away, it had a lot of other physical benefits of doing it, and it made me better at what I do. And also I would talk with my team. I said, okay, team, if we don't take care of ourselves, there's really little chance that we can take care of, you know, the product we're managing or the teams. So we got to take care of ourselves, and I made it okay for them to do that, because that was also culturally not so much a thing back then, that you would actually take time for yourself to do that, you know. And I said, our goal is to get our work done in 8 hours, Monday through Friday. And if so, that's a 40-hour week. You have time with your family, you're doing things with your kids on the weekends. That's the target condition, you know. And if we're not doing that, something's wrong, you know. So we need to really understand what that is and strive to achieve that. It's not a 70-hour work week, which some would say, well, look at me, I do a 70-hour work week, I'm a hero, you know. No, it's getting, you know, the real test, or I guess the real attribute of a high-functioning team is one that can do very well within a 40-hour period, you know, and deliver that result. So I did that. I said, you know, I don't check parking lots. You know, this is what I do, and by saying this is what I do, I want you to know it's okay for you to do it, you know. So I just tried to behave that way, and I.
So even telling your team it's okay
Yeah, yeah.
to go.
If you want to go take a run at lunch,
Oh, wow.
if you want to, you know, every day at 3 o'clock, you're going to stop and you're going to go do, you know, play tennis or
Right.
whatever you want, whatever works for you, to give you like kind of that balanced physical health.
Okay.
Please do it. You
So
know?
I love this approach.
Yeah.
It's you know, especially in a lot of prevalent topics talk about work-life balance.
Yeah.
Here's a leader saying take work-life balance, make it
Yeah.
a thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's an instinct that I think some leaders may find that, you know, if they fear if they allow that or they open the doors to that, that productivity will just drop. I'm curious to know if it was the opposite from your end.
I think it was the opposite. You know, I said, this is what we're going to do. You know, we're all going to get our work done. We understand why we're here. We're going to get our work done. But in doing that, we're going to take care of ourselves, because if we take care of ourselves better, we'll be more effective at getting our work done. And you know, I think everyone agreed with that philosophy.
And did you see members?
Oh,
like-
yeah. I mean, they would, you know, maybe they go play tennis from 3 to 5.
Right.
And then they come home and they'll go, okay, I got to finish this thing, you know, and they'll get on their computer and do whatever they need to do. But it's done, I think, in a more like, they feel much better about it. It's
Right.
not like just this slog, you
Did,
know.
did
so-
you find that they were also more invested in helping out when needed, to stay back when needed, because they
Yeah.
knew the organizations
Yeah.
needed?
Yeah.
But you were going to cut them loose, or when they
Oh, for
weren't?
sure. I trusted them, you know. And so
Right.
they would work it out, you know, like,
Right.
okay, okay, I want to do my run at lunch. Okay, I'm going to stay and I'll do this while you do that. Okay, well then you want to do yours thing. They kind of work it out. I didn't
Right.
like prescribe any kind of
Okay.
approach, you know. The other thing I did was like I have a daughter, and it was super important to me that I don't miss her growing up, you know, and all the band
course.
concerts and the sporting events, and I just, you know, I do not want to miss this, you know. It was so important to me. I mean, I have an amazing wife and daughter who've been all over with me and moved around, and
Right.
you know, we're just really supportive. And so I said to myself, I made this commitment, I will not miss any of my daughter's activities. I had a lot of peers that missed everything.
Especially
you know,
in aerospace.
and they regret it, you know. So I decided I'm not going to miss anything. And if it limits my growth, so be it, you know, because you get one chance at this life. And so I made it to every one of my daughter's sporting events, band. I missed a couple maybe when I was out of the country, but I think I hit like 95%.
Wow,
of
that's
everything.
impressive.
You know, there was times when she was 3 years old and had a swimming lesson at lunch, and I would say, okay, I'm going to my daughter's swimming lesson. I drove to the pool, watched her do her swimming lesson with my wife, and then back to work, you know. So,
Right.
and I said to everyone, I said, I think this is my personal philosophy. I want you, you know, to do what you feel you would like to do so that you're present in your kid's life and so on. And so anyway, at the time, I thought, gee, it's kind of, you know, am I going to, you know, how far might I go in the company? I didn't know. I was a second level manager at the time, and I thought, you know, if this is where I end up, I'm okay with it, because to me, it's really important that I'm part of my daughter's
Right.
life. And now, when I look back on it, had you said to me then, well, you know what, you're going to be a vice president in this company, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, I wouldn't have believed it. It was beyond what I thought I was able to do.
Why?
What I ultimately achieved.
Right. What
you know.
what gave you that impression that?
You know, I don't know. You know, I just looked at some of those positions and I thought, geez, you know, is it possible I could achieve that? You know,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you start to wonder, like, where, you know,
Right.
I think I could do it. You know, but when I do reflect back, thinking of all the experiences I had, the teams I led,
Right.
the positions I held, when I look back, it's like it amazes me that it all happened. You know, it really is. Like, I feel proud of my career. I would do it all over again. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I learned is that I think what happened by me taking that position, it made me better at what I do. It made the teams I led better at what they do. As a result, our performance improved.
This is you balancing.
Yeah, balancing
Yeah.
these things, you know, taking care of my health, being there for my daughter. By me doing that, you know, when I was, you know, fully engaged at work, I was like fully engaged. It was, had high energy. I was really present, and everyone else on the team was that way too. So I think back to the idea of strong links. Rather than just sort of having the hand you're dealt, you've got a few strong links. I felt like I was able to create strong links, and the organization got stronger and stronger and stronger, and it becomes kind of this self-propelling force, that achieves amazing things. And I was rewarded for that, and many others. As much as I am proud that I, got to this level in the company, I think I'm more proud about the others that were on my team that are now vice presidents here and senior directors there. Like, gee, I had something to do with their development, and look what they've achieved.
And this keeps coming back to that core belief and value you shared, where it resonates with you to enable others to thrive. And it sounds like that's what you were able to do with some of these members who may have felt suppressed.
Yeah, I think so. Back to the guy that would yell at me every day, he was probably the most suppressed person I ever came across. And you can even untangle that, which I made it, I thought, I'm going to figure this out, and so I think, you can untangle the most jaded person if you just stick with it, so it's tough.
It is tough. Yeah. A lot of the things you're mentioning are inherently difficult. A lot of members, and we've seen this, we've lived it, resort to that direct approach, the directing approach.
Do what I say.
It's because this is an assumption, but would love to hear your thoughts. But there are members that know that that's not beneficial, at least in the long term. But a lot of members resort to that approach. And what do you think drives that?
I don't know. I think it's like almost maybe an ego thing. People like as my career went on, I would have people come to me like, "Can you mentor me? Help me. I want to figure out maybe how to navigate my career." So I began to do, and I still do a lot of that. First thing I'd ask a person that's contemplating a leadership role, I would say, "Why do you want to do this?" And that would be very telling. Sometimes people would say, "I want to be the boss. I want to be in charge." And then we'd have a conversation. I'd say, "Well, I think you're going to be pretty frustrated if that's your mentality going in."
So it was a sense of authority.
Yeah, a sense of authority, like a higher status. Like look at me. I'm on this org chart. I had one boss. This was as I was kind of nearing the end that had retired. And he said to me, he says, one day you're the vice president of a big organization, and the next day you're just some guy in line at the grocery store. And I thought about that, and I said, I think I've always been the guy in line at the grocery store, has been my way of looking at myself. So I think sometimes people assign their identity to the position they hold. That's in some ways, I don't know if it's an insecurity or what, but it's a feeling of status, or I have power over you. I've just watched people really, their ego gets the best of them. And they don't perform as well. They talk and shout and this and that and make a lot of noise, but the results don't come, So,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So the mindset, in essence, in terms of how it drives forward. Okay. So in terms of the cycle, we've talked about this a little bit so far. There's a very prevalent theme taking place, and it really does remind me of the resonant leadership model. And that resonant state where your human interactions are really what are helping to drive success within the organization, but you're also feeling fulfilled. You're feeling like we matter and we're making a difference, which is really that fulfilling portion. And then you're experiencing all these different types of power stress. The things that you're mentioning, I can just imagine the stresses you were under that resulted in that decline, that resulted in the need to reestablish a goal, the marathon, to drive that personal change. And I'm wondering, how prevalent would you say pain is when it comes to coming to that realization moment, that moment of awareness to drive change?
I'd say quite prevalent. You
Yeah.
know, there's pain that I think it's maybe what causes us to reassess what's happening. You know, there's like running a marathon has pain involved.
It
you
certainly
know?
does.
Yeah, you find yourself at mile 20. It's like, okay, you know, I'm starting to think I'm seeing things here. You know,
Right.
but I said to myself, there's one or two things are gonna happen on that mile 20 of this marathon. I'm gonna finish, or I'm gonna go over in a heap, and the ambulance is gonna have to take me away. Those are the possible outcomes, you know, so I
Right.
just soldiered through, you know, and, but that's true in the work environment too, you know. So I think you have to be physically prepared for that, you know.
Right.
Like there are these tough moments, and you could say it's painful, you know, some of the things you encounter. But if your resilience and your personal health is at a level where you can endure that, you know, I think that's the best approach. You know, get
Right.
yourself capable of enduring that. You can't avoid it in all cases, but you can be better at dealing with it, you know.
And how did you grow that? It's almost like a muscle. You're
It
strengthening.
is, yeah. I
a
think it
muscle.
is a muscle. You know, I think, you know, we need to be, as a human, I think you need to take care of yourself. And like I say, you know, I would have the hardest day. I'd have like the hardest meeting with leadership. You know, they're unhappy with this or that. I would go on a run. In the course of that, my mind would clear. And I would think about, okay, how could I do something different tomorrow? You know, it's true, they say, I think when you're out doing an activity like that ideas can come, where
Right.
previously maybe they wouldn't. So I think I thought of some of my better ideas on how
On
to
the
take
run.
the next step while I was out, you know, and others did too, you know. So I think that's as an important a part of life as the work is. You know, there's always this thought about, well, how do you balance your work and your life? And I think it's kind of just your life, you know. It's hard to like not take work home, or, you know, there's people say I compartmentalize, I leave it at work. I think that's really hard to do. You know?
Right.
It comes home with you, you know, it goes back with you. It affects every element of your life, you know. So I think you got to look at it holistically, you know. And,
Right. So not treat them as separate.
yeah,
but
exactly.
Dependent.
I think it's very hard to compartmentalize anything and have this situation not affect that, you know. I don't know that I'm not able to do that, and I think generally we're not. You know, all of these things that happen to us affect us
Right.
in all aspects of our life, you know.
So enabling healthier lives
Yeah.
for members of the teams, and yourself leading as that example. They're seeing you going for the runs you're talking about.
Oh, right, yeah,
Yeah.
it was like clockwork
Yeah.
for me. My routine was like 3:30 every day.
Okay.
I would not book anything for the team, or no more meetings after 3:30.
Right.
I brought my running stuff with me to work.
To work,
and I would-
okay.
Off I went, you know.
Yeah.
Rain
Yeah.
or shine, you know.
Amazing.
And so that became kind of like almost like, oh, there goes Dave again.
Again,
you know,
yeah.
they all knew, and then we would
Okay.
kind of laugh about it, you know, and
Right.
tell stories, and so, you know,
No,
that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and it's,
Yeah.
it's different. It's going to capture
Yeah.
some attention.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And
Yeah.
so you're building your physical resilience. You're increasing the engagement with those secure members in your lives.
Right.
You're investing in your daughters growing up and
Yeah.
the family life, and your peers are seeing that at work, and they feel now safe
Yeah.
to do the
You
same.
Do the same.
Right.
And then my hypothesis is that if you do that, people will, you know, they're going to be the healthiest version of themselves, and their performance at work will grow. I just had this faith that this would happen because I believe it's true, you know. And then, of course, the results came, and, you know, we got kind of out of the crisis into just like difficulty, into some, you know, steady, you know, like, hey, gee, you know, we're kind of just clicking right along here, you
Right.
know. We're after sort of this very steady performance. We would enjoy that. Now, in aerospace, things can come out of the, you know, out of left field, so to speak. So, but that should be more of an exception than the rule, you know. And let's strive for steady, stable production. And then
Right.
once in a while, we're going to have like a curveball come our way, and we'll deal with it. We would strive for that condition, and then, you know, let's hold on to this. It's a very
Right.
dear condition to have, you know. So we would get kind of our stability where we want it. And I'd say to the team, you know what, it's a whole lot easier to keep this. That, you know, it's it's kind of like driving down the highway. It's a lot easier to stay out of the ditch than to get out of the ditch, you know.
Right.
So when you're kind of sailing down the highway, you want to maintain that. And sometimes, you know, we can get a little complacent. So I'd use these little analogies. I said, okay, so we're driving down the highway. I'd talk about this. There is a white line on the highway that's visible. And if you cross over it, it ought to be an indicator like, oh, geez, I'm getting a little out of my lane here. However, it's just, you know, there's a visual, like, you could miss that if you were looking a different direction. A lot of highways have, like, these rumble strips, so, you know, you hit those, it wakes you right up. It's like, whoa, you know. So I'd always, even under calm times, I'd say, let's think about all of our, you know, our operations, like what's our white line and what's our rumble strips? What's the tripwire that causes us to react before we find ourselves bouncing through some field here, you know? So I had to do that as well, because I think if you know, people will sort of relax a little bit if we are in a stable period.
Right.
And we have to have our antenna up, you know.
There's a common theme I'm seeing here where you're constantly pulling the perspective.
Yeah.
Whether it's scenarios or challenging what's the tripwire for some of the risks that we see.
Yeah. So
And that was a pretty consistent part of your
it is, and I think it's normal, maybe human behavior, to get a little comfortable when things are going well. Not that we want to be uncomfortable, but we want to just be, you know, be aware of. It's important that if we notice that we're drifting a bit, that we catch it quick and we get back and we catch it quick. And if we go a little further, you know, okay, we've hit these rumble strips, that's a little bit more of a jolt, let's get it back, you know.
Right.
But if you haven't thought about that, if you don't have already in your mind, you know, let's pick a KPI, like, gee, if quality starts to kind of creep this direction and passes a certain, you know, control line that we set, we're going to react. You know, if you haven't thought about that, you may miss it, you may not react, you may not, until it commands your attention in such a dramatic way.
Right.
Deal with it, and now you're back into a crisis again, you know.
So some of the tools I'm hearing, the visual of that end state in terms of the 8-month goal, we're doing scenario training to pull the perspective from the day-to-day or even the shift to shift to something more long-term, where we're challenging risk assessment and really encouraging creativity, and they feel safe to be able to say ideas freely without being judged for it. And now we're pulling into that same perspective approach, and these are all tools where once in a while you'll look at the trends and ask, what are some of the tripwires we're seeing that might tip us over the edge here? And those are some very powerful tools, which I think anyone in the senior leadership position or a director can start to use and build into their schedule once a month or once a quarter, an activity that pulls that. Were there any other tools or techniques that you wove into how you executed?
Yeah, but you know, I think, you know, you hit on a word that's important, which is, I think, to reflect on how you're doing. And that's another, I think, habit to get into, which maybe we don't do as much as we should. So I would institute a process with any business unit I led or multiple business units that once a quarter, we're going to take a pause. And the leadership of the organization, we're going to get together and we're going to take a kind of step back and look. This plan we're on, is it delivering the results we expected? And kind of reflect on that and go, okay, what do we know now that we didn't know when we set the plan a quarter ago? Do we need to make any adjustments? So we would do this quarterly reflection as a way of really taking a pause and stepping back and evaluating our plan.
This is like an after-action review?
Yeah, I'd say an after-action review is a good way to think about it. And, you know, when I had teams that were geographically separated, like I had a team that was in the Seattle area and Charleston, the interior team, and we did it face-to-face, you know. So one quarter it was in Charleston, another quarter it's in Seattle. I was really, to me, even though we had virtual tools, I wanted to do that, to build relationships with people that have similar responsibilities but are, you know, 3 time zones apart from each other. But we would do this reflection or this after-action review every quarter. And as we got, you know, into doing it, we got a little better at doing it. You know, we started to really think about how we might make a more robust plan. I think it's like a skill that you can build by practicing. But often I would observe teams that don't reflect at all.
At all.
They just sort of roll forward.
Right.
And,
They're focused on the hour to hour in
exactly.
essence.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So even expanding on that behavior, so the after action review, the tools keeping perspective in the midterm is highly beneficial. What were some of the detrimental behaviors or strategies that you had to look out for to make sure it wasn't winding back the clock on the progress you were making?
Well, I think it's just really, I had high expectations of our leadership team, and it's not that everyone was fully on the bus all the time, there were people that didn't want to, felt like, no, this is the wrong way to lead.
Right.
I've made my way in the company being this commanding leader, and I would work with them, but there were times when I just had to say, this is not a good fit for us, so I've had to exit people from leadership, exit them from the company. Fortunately, I didn't do a lot of that, but I did, because if you don't deal with those things, it's like a sickness on the organization. It's like a sickness that we would get as a person. If you don't treat that, it's going to affect and expand and, be something that may harm the health of you in totality, So I had to be willing and able to deal with that, which I did. Not every person behaved like we expected, and I dealt with that, And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they came along, but there were some that didn't,
Right.
So it just became a discussion I would have. This is what I expect. What I found with people when they weren't performing was it boiled down to one of two things. They lack the skill, which I would do everything possible to help strengthen the skill, or they lack the will. Like, I'm not going to do that. And that's a very difficult one to solve. I realize if a person's like hard over, I'm just not doing this, then we got to find an off ramp for them.
Did you find most members where when you were able to engage them and just talk and just let them humanize the environment, feel safe to do so, did you find will increased most of the time?
Yeah, I think so, because sometimes what appears on the surface to be a lack of will is really frustration over a lack of skill. And their way of communicating it back to you is like anger and frustration. And when you sort of decompose that, it's not so much that they philosophically disagree, like I don't believe in that. It's that they're not sure how to do it. And in not knowing how to do it, they're getting very frustrated. And that can come back to you in this sort of like, oh, they're very disgruntled,
Right.
But when you unpack it, you find, oh, hey, maybe they just need a little bit of help here. And that brings the stress level down and they perform fine, So I think there's an element of working with people. I would try as hard as I could to help a person be successful. And I think all through my career, on the few occasions when I did have to exit a person, I would think to myself, did I take too long to do that? Or should I have done that sooner? And maybe I took a little too long. I guess I'd rather err on the side of compassion, but I got, I think, smarter as to how much is the right amount of time. But a lot of it, like I say, 9 times out of 10, or maybe like 99 times out of 100, a person just needs help building the skill. It's not common that they're just like, I am not doing that. That they're just hard over, I am not doing that. That's uncommon.
Right.
But sometimes it might seem like it's happening, and what's really going on is they're just frustrated.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I really liked that statement. Sometimes what looks like a lack of will is just not having the skill or realizing they had the capacity to
they're
fix
just,
it.
Like, I can't do this, and they're not able to communicate it well, and it just comes to you as they're upset and angry, and you have to I found that I have to start to ask some questions and sort of back to my Brian that yelled his message at me. I learned over time how to deconstruct some of that to get at really what's driving their unhappiness.
I find, especially in aerospace, we can really start to paint the vision by our day-to-day interactions. And sometimes you're doing the same job every single day. And sometimes you can start to lose an understanding of why you're still here. Sometimes the final product is so downstream that it's not even realistic to think about. And I know from my experience, sometimes there can be near misses or challenges which suddenly,
Like
reach
get your attention. Yeah.
And did you find, certainly whether it was the same type of near misses or a win, which re-emphasized, why we're doing things a certain way within the business?
I had I just for all through it all, I wanted to always impress upon everyone how important their job is.
Right.
Every job, and when I was working in our interior business unit, there were some jobs, sanding a panel so it can be painted properly, that might feel fairly mundane,
Right.
But I would go on and on at all employee meetings and all manager meetings. Like every job is vitally important. The job I do is no more important or less important than the job you do. They're just different jobs, It takes us all, We cannot deliver an airplane unless we're all able to do the work we do. And this really became vivid. I can't remember if it was 2014, 2015.
Right.
There was an airplane, a 777 Asiana airplane that was coming into San Francisco to land, and there's like a seawall. You come in over the water, there's a seawall. Well, the pilot misjudged the altitude and clipped the back of the airplane on this seawall. Okay. And that's a pretty catastrophic impact. It sheared the back portion of the airplane off.
So not just like a tail strike skid. But
This imagine the last quarter of the airplane is separated.
Just sheared off the tail. Right?
Yeah, so there's pieces here and the fuselage is sliding down the runway, and horrible situation. And one requirement, though, of the interior of the airplane is we have really high standards for flammability. It just cannot catch on fire. We have to demonstrate to certify the airplane that it can withstand flame, a fire-type condition for 30 minutes and not catch on fire.
Right.
And when we also certify a new airplane, we also have to demonstrate that we can get people off. And so we actually do this when we build a new airplane. We actually get volunteers and we figure out, we can get everyone off the airplane in 3 minutes or less, So anyway, this 777 Asiana airplane had this incident, and everyone got off the airplane safely. We had the interior perform just like it was supposed to. It didn't catch on fire. Everyone was able to get off. There were some injuries, but there was more than 300 people on this airplane. It could have been catastrophic. There's pictures probably on the internet you can look at. Eventually, this thing did catch on fire, and it's like this burnt-out hulk of an airplane sitting on the runway, but everyone's off. So that became really a point to make, as here I am telling the story now, but when I was leading that interior business unit, I said, okay, here's why. We talked about the Asiana airplane.
Right.
Every person that sands a part or puts the wallpaper on a part or fastens this to that or glues this to, or designs the next, closet for the airplane. This is why we do what we do, because people's lives are at stake. We make these machines that fly, and our families are flying on these airplanes. So it really reinforced that, I think.
Right. I'm assuming they started to, not started, but it reinforced their actions saved lives that day.
Yeah, and they'd heard me talk about it for years. Every time I'd be in front of them, I said, okay, everyone, our jobs are super important. We've got to do them well. They're important jobs. I admire what you do. If you said to me, hey, Dave, we're going to put you sanding, that I could not do what you do. I tried to be humble about it. You have skills that I could never hope to do, My job is to make sure the burden is lifted off of you so you can do, unencumbered the very best work you can, get you the right tools, all of the things you
unlocking
need.
that potential.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Dave, I think there are members that are going to be listening and watching, senior leaders that are hearing that they would love to have the same type of impact. They'd love to be able to increase work-life balance for their employees. They'd like to lead by example and take in more physical activity, for
Yeah.
example. They may like the idea of a visual depiction of an end state to
Yeah,
really,
sure.
bring that vision, not necessarily like a strategic vision, but
Yeah.
a shared ideation of the intent and the end state that we all want to achieve,
Right.
and bring that perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's leaders that would want to elicit investment in them individually, not just the organization or the reason for the vision and the statement, for example, but them, because it's a mutual investment.
Right.
They'd like to do those things, but they're hesitant. They're fearful that it won't be received well within the organization, or that it'll be received in a poor fashion with their subordinates.
Yeah.
And it's holding them back, and there's a sense of cognitive dissonance. There's that, I've done it, sitting in the parking lot, hesitant at walking in because it's going to be a tough day. They're facing that friction, that hesitation. What would your advice be to someone that wants to move into that position and be that kind of organization?
I think it's the right way to approach the work. I philosophically 100% believe in that. I think what I spent, 40 years learning is how do you actually do it, So kind of where I'm at in my life, in my career now, is I want to help people translate that sort of hope into action. Like, there are things you can do every day, every week, every month, and these are learnable skills, So like the work you're doing, Sean, I think it's vital, There's a lot of training people can take. I think it's aimed at expanding their knowledge. Like, to have a high functioning team, you should build trust. And we all get that, yes, I understand that. Not so much out there on what can I do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And I really want to give that way, because I've learned it, I think, overdoing it. But boy, if someone could have advised me early on and said, okay, Dave, here's the things you need to do in order to, I could have been more effective quicker, I think, than having just sort of learned as I went. And I'm convinced that these are teachable skills. Even I had a person on my team that he had been in a leadership role for 35 years, this rough guy, very scary guy. He came to me, this was back in the interior job, he came to me and he said, this way you're kind of leading us, I like. And he said, but I learned, this other method, and I've been doing it for all these years, and people are afraid of me and so on.
Right.
He says, can you help me? Because I've got 2 more years. I'm going to retire in 2 years. I want to show people that even I can adjust my approach and I can be a different person. And I said, yes. And I said, let's work together. We spent a lot of time, he and I, and he demonstrated over the couple of years that there are different ways to do this. And I think he shocked a lot of people. He was this big, rough, scary guy, and he became a nurturing, mentoring person, and he would even, used himself as an example on maybe how not to do things. Like, I used to be like this, Oh, yes, you did used to be like this, and he said, but there's a different way. And I think we owe it to those coming behind us, to treat them well. So I think it can be learned by even the gruffest person. I found can become better at this.
It's interesting. So even just starting with one person, living it as an example, demonstrating that there's a different approach, enabled the safety for someone to want to take that step. And then I'm assuming it continued to scale within the organization.
Definitely, and one of the things I've learned too is I left Boeing in 2020, and I have what I call a whole host of volunteer jobs, and I'm spending time with organizations I didn't know I could help in healthcare. I was helping a group at the Mayo Clinic that I got acquainted with, helping a group of pharmacists right now, helped a guy that led an athletic apparel company. What I've learned is that these sorts of issues and situations that I faced exist in every walk of life, So I'm just trying to now spread around as best I can to help people that are in the trenches, trying to figure out how to make it work, every day.
And even if, to pull on your experience, especially across the world, those members that are quite literally in those trenches, right? They're the ones that are living shift to shift, right? And are trying to compartmentalize, are starting to see that decline stage. And it's going to result in either being jaded, their personal resilience is getting challenged, their supportive relationships are getting strained. What would be your advice for that demographic? The ones struggling to keep their head above water, to be honest.
I guess it's important. Like for me, I think I was in that place. I talked about in my early 30s, I found myself in a very undesirable place. Like, am I going to continue doing this, or am I going to do something else? And I think, we have to address that condition. I felt like I can't live my life like this. I've got to take care of my health better. And so it drove me, down the path I ended up going down. But I think if a person finds themselves in sort of the doldrums, just to stop and really examine where they are, because we just get one pass through this life. It's important to me, at least it was important for me, that I made the best of it, and I took care of myself and my family and the things that were. I guess I really thought about what is super important to me, and what gives me joy. Those two things. And I kind of actually even made a list. This is really important to me. My wife, my daughter. It's important to me that that I lead people in a kind, uplifting way. It's important to me that I take care of my health. I get a lot of joy helping others be successful. So I made sure I had firm clarity on, what is important to me and what gives me joy. And then now, given where I said, given the condition, what can I do to drive myself to that? And I was able to do it within the organization I was in. Sometimes people may have to make a career change. Who knows, But I think pausing and thinking, like if you find yourself just like, I think if you can think about what's important and what gives you joy and pursue that, then you'll be happy.
Right, which is the real goal, to live happier, which is amazing. The business leaders that want to unlock this for their members, their leaders, their team members, the ones that see those critical enablers, they want to scale this within their organization. What would your advice be for how do you start? How do you start looking at your organization, and how do you move the needle forward to build that culture that you really want to live?
I think you start like one person at a time, kind of like coming into a new organization. I described how I entered the Winnipeg job. That was one person at a time. And I also think about it in terms of it's not an initiative or a program. It's a lifestyle choice you make. This is how we're going to operate, and I would do that and demonstrate that, but then I talked nonstop about it with my team. This is how we behave. This is how we operate. It's not like, we get this done by next Friday and we're good to go. No, it's how we live. It's the fabric of our world. And I would just talk about it in those kinds of terms, which means we have to have patience. It's not gonna, we may not even notice day by day this improvement, but one advantage of reflecting every so often is you can look back and say, wow, look where we were and where we are. We could sure be proud of what we've accomplished. And then I could say, I suspect that when we do this again in a quarter, we'll look back to today and be really happy with the progress we've made, So it's important to set those anchor points, I think, reflect on the success, be proud of what you've accomplished, adjust course as needed, carry on, keep doing it. But it's just this lifestyle that you decide to adopt. And you just never stop.
You have to be consistent to it. Absolutely. That's very powerful. I think being able to start into it, I really like the approach of starting with one person at a time.
I think so. One, and then two, and then three, and then you just, over time, it grows. I think what happens then, you start to affect their life, and they've got some network. It's like ripples in a pond. You know, I mentioned when I had like an organization of 6,000 people, I was doing with my direct reports of 15, but then those nodes, you know, the whole thing just spreads that way when you can make that kind of your operating system and culture.
It's, you know, it's impressive. First, it's impressive to keep hearing. You have a talent for pulling the perception back to the why and to the long term. Probably what made you such a successful strategic leader, especially at the vice president level. And I think a lot of members need that. Someone needs to pull them out of the ground level and start seeing the horizon.
Yeah.
And what also strikes me is that humanistic approach. Being able to first have the resilience to not go in directing and just listen. And understand, you know, to focus and realize if I focus on myself and I can be the example for work-life balance, it won't hurt productivity. It'll elicit increased investment and productivity. These are approaches which take a bit of faith.
I think so.
A bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm impressed that it's been able to sustain over decades.
Yeah.
And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it on the courses you've instructed with members from sites like the Boeing Canada Winnipeg, and I've seen their gratitude towards you, which sustained years after the fact.
Yeah.
If you had to look back at your career, which clearly was heavily driven from the interpersonal reactions, the people sounds like they were the main catalyst to success. When you look at your career as a whole, is there anything that sticks out that helped shape and visualize and encompasses that journey that still sticks with you today?
You know, I think, you know, I would think often about what is my real role here, you know, and I think in its most simplest terms was the role of the leader is to remove burden in a way that allows the team to be successful. So I often, almost every day, I'd be walking out the door, checking like, okay, I feel kind of tired today. Did I accomplish things that I feel good about? And the days when I really definitely unloaded burden from others, I felt like, yes, good day. I had a lot of progress today. Days that I got drawn into something, I didn't do that. I had less. I just felt tired, you know.
Of course,
So I always reflected on, this is why I'm here, you know. I did a thought experiment with in the interior business unit, there was 2,500 employees and about 150 managers. And I had an all-manager meeting. I said, okay, let's do this thought experiment. What do you think would happen if we all stopped coming to work? What do you think would happen in our factory and in our design offices and so on? And they're going, okay, what kind of question is this? I said, my guess is it would just carry on, you know. They would build parts, they would design parts, we would order parts, all that would happen. Maybe after a few weeks, you know, we have a supply shortage, things might get a little, you know, may start to be disrupted. I said, now let's flip the script. What happens if only we show up for work and the 2,350 people do not come to work? Then what happens? And within seconds, someone said, nothing happens. I said, you're right, nothing happens. It stops immediately, you know. So let's think about what we do, really. You know, our job is to take away the burden from that group of 2,350 people. So, you know, we should evaluate ourselves every day on, are we doing that? You know, are we getting caught up in chasing a shortage or, you know, whatever it might be, this sort of treadmill thing we talked about? Or are we stepping back and getting the burden? We really need to strive to do that, you know. So, or you know, we're not adding the value we need to add. So I tried to make that, you know, a mental image people could have. And I said every day is an opportunity for you to reflect on, did you remove burden today? Did you add burden? Sometimes leaders add burden, don't they, you know? So I've had a lot of leaders that gave me plenty of burden. You know? So.
And that that sticks in your mind.
It
that
does,
was something you were able to consistently
enable. Every
Right.
team I've had since, and even now outside of Boeing, we talk about what's their role. Do you really understand how important it is?
Right.
So, yeah.
But was there something that helped bring those, the members who felt unburdened by those actions, and have they continued to stay in your life afterwards?
Yeah, one quick story. When I was in interiors, I was walking the factory floor one day, and there was a guy that was on our stow bin, which is where you put your bag on the airplane, close the door. We build those on a moving production line. On the 737 at the time, we had a tack time of one finished stow bin every 9 minutes had to come off that line in order to keep up with the rate. So I walk up to this guy that was pretty new. He was a young guy, Tyler. He was on the stow bin line, and I said, "Oh, hey, Tyler, how's it going?" He'd been in the company like 6 months. I said, "How you doing?" And he said, "All right," not really happy. And I said, "Gee," I could tell in his voice. I said, "Well, what's going on? Is there something you don't like about building stow bins?" "Nothing wrong with building stow bins." And he says, "But I have an architecture degree, and I want to. I thought maybe if I came into Boeing, I could get into like facilities and construction management. I just decided I'm going to take any job I can get. Once I'm in the door, I'll figure it out. Well, he says, I feel trapped on this stow bin line. I got to get my 9 minutes of work done in my station, and no one can help me. I don't know who to call. I don't know this. I don't. He was really frustrated, and so I learned. That's why you need to say hello to everyone. You start to learn about them, and if I had not done that, or just kept walking. Who would, years could have gone by before I figured out Tyler had an architecture degree. Well, anyway, I made some calls, I introduced him to some people, helped him kind of navigate the bureaucracy. And within 3 months, he was in a facilities planner job.
Okay.
And that happened probably 12 years ago. And I've been out of the company since 2020. I still get messages from Tyler. He said, "Hey, Dave, Tyler here. Guess what? I'm managing this big building project, It made a difference in his life, and for me, it wasn't that hard to do, but it required that I actually asked the question and checked in,
Right.
So back to why I think one of the easiest things you can do to start to build trust is say hello to people and be approachable and,
Right.
come up and say hello to them in a way that's not just, when are you going to get this done?
Right.
It's like, "Oh, hey, Sean, how you doing? How's climbing going? I've got to know you so I can ask you questions about, oh, you're going to go climb this peak in Bolivia next year. That's so cool,
Right.
And we can have a chit chat about that, and it's fun and engaging. And then, okay, now let's see, where are we at on this? What can we do? Is there anything I can help you with? But you don't start with that. You start with the part that really helps you build a rapport.
Yeah, it's really must be fulfilling to look back and see all these stories of. To be honest, it's the same value, unlocking members' potential to allow them to thrive and live happier lives.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine, some members sum up their careers with the accomplishments, the accolades, the position titles they've been able to enable. And I love the idea of being able to look back at a 40-year career in aerospace and think to the people that were enabled through your actions, right? Not just the milestones, the scaling initiatives, but career changes, right? Or changing their leadership approaches, not just for the members they were leading, but that they were happier with who they were as a person, right?
Right.
It must be impressive.
One of the things, like over the course of my career, like many large companies, they'll give you little awards, maybe a coffee cup or this little plaque. And I don't think I have any of that.
Okay.
I don't know where it is.
Okay.
Who knows? Who knows what happened to it? I'll say I don't have any of the, quote, trinkets that the company.
Right.
But what I do have is every person that ever sent me a thank you note for helping them, every email that I got saying, "Gee, Dave, that was really great. Thank you for that." Or, "Thanks for introducing me to this person," or "Thanks for this," or "Thanks for that." I kept everyone.
Wow.
I had a file in my email folder that was like the thank you note file. And I just was heartwarming to read through it. And then on a particularly hard day, I would open that up and it would kind of revive me, you know. But anyway, at the end, 36 years later, I've got this giant file, you know. And I've also got these handwritten thank you notes because I was working at Boeing before we did email.
Sure.
Anyway, I had this office administrator, Loretta. She says, here, I got an idea. You give me all that. And I said, okay, here you go. And then she cast this broad net. Hey, Dave, you know, he's going to retire. If you've got any anecdotes or stories, and she threw this large net across the company. What that resulted in was a bound book that's like 3 inches thick.
Wow.
It's this like volume, you know, like Dave's career. And that is like the best thing anyone could have ever given me, you know.
Right.
I look at that thing and it brings back these memories like, oh yeah, I remember that, like the Tyler story, you know. I love that, you know. So that's what matters to me, you know.
Yeah,
I've got a handful of Boeing coffee cups, but I don't have them all, you know.
Yeah, what a truly unique and I can't think of a better representation of that type of impact.
Yeah.
And the result of that impact all coming together. And to be honest, I think that's a really good approach that you chose to as well, to save those emails. You know, it's a moment of resonance to be able to look at something like that, to remind yourself of the good that we do.
Yeah, it helps when you're having a hard day, you know. It's like, oh man, well, I can just kind of sift through that for 10 minutes. And it kind of revives me. It's like, oh yes, that's why I'm doing this.
Absolutely. I think it's a great recentering thing, but what an amazing memento.
Yeah,
right?
It was great. Yeah.
I can just imagine how much of that you cherish that. And I think that's a really great culmination point for the philosophy that you've shared with us today.
Yeah,
right?
you bet. Yeah.
And so much to unpack here. There's so many tools that you've mentioned, the visualization, the constant pulling members from that ground level to the perspective, understanding that it may not be a lacking will. They may just not have the skill or feel that they have the ability to enact.
And that vast majority of time, that's what it is.
That's what
it's
it is.
rare when it's the, you know, just the, I'm not doing it. That is rare.
Right.
You know? But, you know, back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to unpack and spend a little time and absorb a little feedback that might be difficult to try to really get at the truth.
And
know?
keep it going.
Yeah.
You've got to, and then living it, living the life that you want to impart to your members, and and realizing that you're going to get more from them by investing in them and living it.
Yeah. And I think you know, it spreads into the community. You know, the world is under a lot of stress. I think I just felt like my role was not only to make sure our company ran well, but if their life is good at Boeing, it's good at home, and if it's good at home, it's good at the school, and if it's good at the school, it's good. You know, all of that spreads, I believe. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of anyone, really in almost any industry that we're talking about here, especially since you've worked contributing to so many other industries post-Boeing. Members who face different challenges that want to enact the same effect. I love the idea of, if you're going to start, try starting with one person at a time.
I think so. Right. Yeah, one at a time.
That's fantastic.
And just work from there and never stop.
And never stop. Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
great.
Thank you very much, Dave. I think that's a wonderful
it's my
point.
Pleasure. Yeah, thanks to Sean. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And,
absolutely.
And
many more ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Really, I think about what's important to me and what gives me joy. You know, that conversation, this gives me a lot of joy to do this. So thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pleasure to have you here.
Great.
Thanks, Dave.